of course, you've done now books with 4 presidents, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump. Could you give me, in each case, a brief summary of something surprising that struck you from each one, beginning with Jimmy Carter?
Well, I don't know if they're surprising if they, as much as they are revealing. I mean, the thing about Carter was his extraordinary, really, truly extraordinary authenticity when you got up close to him. I mean, I sat in his kitchen with he and Rosalind holding hands, saying grace. He in fact, wrote all the books himself. I did a book, a ridiculous book of children's book that he did with Amy. I did a book of his poetry, which was actually not bad. But I mean, I don't know if it was bad because I don't know anything about poetry, but I published it and it worked. It was a significant bestseller for 7 weeks. So Jimmy was authentic.
All right, Clinton?
Bill was charismatic and wrestling a book out of him. We did his sort of so-called secret 1996 book during the campaign. And we finally got it done. But getting Bill to focus was very difficult. And when he went on C-SPAN, Brian Lamb said, "So why didn't the book do better?" And Bill said, "Well, I didn't really have time to promote it." And so I wrote to him and said, "You're the first author in history who didn't say it was the publisher's fault." The truth is, the book wasn't very good, and
Right.
Bill was distracted. Barack came to me after his book had been rejected by Simon & Schuster because he missed his deadline. Can you believe that? And we published it in 1995. It's a good book, Dreams from My Father, sold modestly. 9 years later, he gave the keynote speech to the Democratic Convention. The same book, dusted off, sold 4 million copies. And Trump, again, I've been asked 1,000 times about how do you feel in my campaign? Well, I've been at Random House a very short time, and the owner, Mr. Newhouse, decided he wanted to do a book with Trump, and it was very unusual for Newhouse to want to do a book like that. I was, quote, tasked, and I went to see Trump with Cy. He was so flattered that Cy wanted to. Remember, Cy was Roy Cohn's best friend. That's Roy Cohn's son house.
That was the connection, probably.
And I'm sitting there, and next thing I know, there's a contract, no agent, no lawyer, and a writer named Tony Schwartz who already wanted to do the book. We published a book called The Art of the Deal, and it sold 1 million copies in the first 3 months. I once saw him in a wrestling arena in Atlantic City a year or 2 later, before The Apprentice. 18,000 people, the kind of people who would go to Atlantic City wrestling. When Trump comes in the arena, they cheer, they roar. So when he became a major candidate in 2015, whereas an awful lot of other people say, this is a joke, it can't be taken seriously, I was uneasy because I believed that what we saw in Donald Trump in the mid 80s or late 80s, it was his hold on the kind of people who would go to professional wrestling in Atlantic City. Turns out there were a lot of them.
Yeah.
And so I think the biggest political mistake of modern American history was underestimating Trump when he ran for president and believing that somehow he would turn out not to be what he was. He was what he was. I saw him as a young man, but then he was a developer.
Yeah.
Later,
by the way, we're about halfway through. So if any of our listeners and watchers want to pose a question, just do it on chat. Some have been coming up, but I find I can't see the entire question. So Patricia, if you or Chad or someone else wants to read out a question that strikes you as a good one, by all means do it. I'd like to just continue the Trump business for a while, because in effect, that book, The Art of the Deal, not only launched him, but sort of created him. I mean, Tony Schwartz built I think, largely fictional picture of a master businessman, et cetera, that captured, I guess, an element of truth, which he's got a kind of primal ability to make some people do what he wants them to do. Tony Schwartz is, filled with mea culpas over this. Do you think, in retrospect, that book was kind of a mistake?
Well, first of all, I disagree with the fact that it was fiction.
I mean, the persona, the character.
Tony, you have to distinguish with the fact that Tony did a much better job than he now is comfortable recognizing. Meaning, he really did capture the essence of what Donald Trump wanted to be and was. I don't do it for the money, I do it to do it. Well, that's baloney. But the fact is, the stories he tells in the book are all real stories. There's nothing in there that's fiction. He built Trump Tower. The New York Times, a newspaper with which you are familiar, its first story about Donald Trump said he looks a little like Robert Redford.
Yeah, I remember that.
When Cy Newhouse had GQ put him on the cover, it sold like crazy. So here's the thing about Trump. Donald Trump was, when I saw him, much more, very young, but he was the same person he was when he became president. Lived over the store, whether it was Trump Tower or the White House. Didn't smoke, didn't drink. Never went anywhere without his name on it, really in the end, except for political rallies. And in the end, only really cared about himself. Truly only cared about himself. Not really, truly only cared about himself. But was a developer in New York, that's one thing. But 40 years later, 30 years later, when he's the president of the United States, remember, who thought up all those terrible nicknames? Trump does. Trump thrived on a kind of sinister instinct that, it is not wrong to compare him to people of the past who had that capacity to connect in a way that's ultimately sinister, but mustn't be misunderstood as phony. It's real in his connection to people. That's the man who he was. And as I said, when he ran and people said it's a joke, and besides that, we don't like Hillary, that's how we got Trump.
Right.
We got Trump because we didn't take Trump as seriously as we should have. And we didn't like Hillary, and we got Donald Trump. And what you saw was Donald Trump, same fella, but now on steroids.
Got it.